Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Deconstructing the System with GPH. Today, we are discussing a complex issue that is often controversial in nature. We have a case study that we'll be basing our discussion off of, and a wonderful guest speaker to elaborate further on real-world application. Today, we are talking about the complex issue of homeless youth as it relates to drug addiction and psychosis. Joining us today is Lonnie Walker, the founder and CEO of JOY Baltimore, a grassroots organization dedicated to the care of homeless youth in Baltimore, Maryland. We will begin with a discussion of the case study and then fully introduce our guest speaker. I'm now going to turn the floor over to my colleagues Amanda, Haley, and Matthew to review the study.
The case study we chose today involves homeless youth suffering from psychosis and substance use disorder. It studied the addition of an intensive assertive community intervention team, housing support, and integrated care for psychosis and substance use disorder to an early intervention program.
Outcomes from homeless youth suffering from first episode psychosis that received early intervention for psychosis service and integrated care for psychosis and substance use disorder since 2012 were compared to homeless youth suffering from first episode psychosis that received only early intervention for psychosis service from 2005 to 2011. This study lasted 2 years, and socio-demographic data, housing stability, functioning illness severity, substance use disorder severity, emergency room visits, and hospitalizations were assessed.
And by the end of the study, the authors had come to the conclusion that the homeless youth who had access to both intensive assertive community intervention team as well as an early intervention for psychosis service were not only able to achieve housing stability more rapidly, but also spent less time in the hospital. And this is in comparison to the homeless youth who only had access to an early intervention service. And this only further demonstrates the importance of having community intervention available, which brings us to our guest speaker. So, Mr. Walker, if you would, tell us a little bit more about what you do.
So unfortunately, due to some technical difficulties, we lost the audio of Lonnie Walker introducing him and his organization, but essentially it's a grassroots organization that works in Baltimore to aid in the care of homeless youth seeking help. So JOY Baltimore offers youth ages 13 to 24, specifically LGBTQ, but not exclusively, emergency and permanent housing, medical and dental care records, and Maryland IDs as a way to, help alleviate their situations.
Excellent.
What does your line of work entail, and how do you think people perceive your line of work? Do you encounter a lot of opposition or resistance to the work that you guys do?
Well, we definitely get a lot of resistance because we are one organization that holds people accountable. You can't make someone get clean. You can't make someone be unhomeless. They have to want it. And so I can lead you to the water, but I can't make you drink the water. And so when you are ready, we encourage people, when you are ready, you're more than welcome to come back to us, because I'm not going to disrupt anyone else's recovery or anyone else's homeless situation because you're not ready. And so other organizations will take people in, and you have to take the right people in and know that they're ready, because you will disrupt somebody else's placement if they're in your program and someone else comes in and they're not ready. They're just looking for a one-nighter or a two-nighter until that food stamps come or that check come and they can what they want to do, but they have that space. And so we hold people accountable. We have those hard conversations with clients. If this is what you want, we got you. But if it's not what you want, go on back out there. When you're ready to come back in, we got you. That's what we do. We hold people accountable.
Our next question is, does stigma play a role in the continuation of the problem? Stigma being around the people who suffer from the substance abuse.
Stigma definitely plays a role, especially when you come from a family that's had a lot of drug use, or you don't consider the drug that you're using a problem. So stigma definitely becomes an issue. And as a gay African American male who's from who's from poverty, I'm from the hood, I'm from the projects in Brooklyn, New York. I put my life in there. I tell them, what I've gone through, what my family's gone through, what some of my family is currently going through. So it has to be real. You have to make it real for people to understand. And I don't want clients or people to come into the program to think, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You ain't never experienced it. No. Let's have that conversation. So I talk from realistic stuff, not from a textbook, not from, well, I seen this. No, this is what I know. And I'm not going to tell you anything that I don't know firsthand.
Yeah, speaking from experience communicates greater volumes than just speaking about statistics that you've read in a book.
All right, our next question is, what are the top 3 most frequently seen issues for homeless youth overall?
Top 3. Money, food, and employment.
Do you think substance abuse takes part in these issues as well?
Young people don't see it as an issue. That's why I didn't use substance abuse. I didn't use alcohol or marijuana because young people don't see those things as an issue. But if they don't have no money, they don't have no food, those are issues for them. And it's not just a pack of oodles and noodles. It has to be what they want. And so technically, I can give you some oodles and noodles or a cup of soup. But if it's not Chick-fil-A, Chipotle, whatever, they don't. It's levels to this. Homeless young people have a cell phone. The cell phone bill will be paid, but they won't have a place to sleep.
So how do you communicate to the young people how to prioritize what they actually need? How do you teach them what is actually important?
Being hard on them and being strict. I think I'm the meanest person in the world. But my young people keep coming back. They know that Mr. Lonnie's not going to lie to them. They know that I'm going to have their back. But this is what you got to do. You have to do your part. I'm going to make sure myself and my team do what we need to do. But you have to do your part. I can help you apply for food stamps. I can help you apply for housing. But what part do you play in it? I can't sit there and hold your hand. Because when you leave the program, no one's going to hold your hand in the real world.
Yeah, like you said, you hold people accountable, and that's really respected. How do you help them overcome these challenges in and out of the program?
So we continue to have groups. We invite people in with lived experience. I love drug counselors, so forth and so on, but I need people with lived experience. I need people who has lost children to drug abuse. I need mothers who have lost their children to drug abuse who've gotten clean. It's easier to lose your kids, but it's harder to get them back. And these are the people that we bring and we put in front of them to have these conversations with them. And so the conversations and the topics and the groups and the meetings are realistic meetings. This is what can happen. We had a client that died. He left the program, and is either you're gonna do right or you're gonna die. There's no middle ground. And that's the kind of conversations you have to have. And maybe out of 6 people, 4 probably got it. And then the other 2 are going to go on until they get, knee deep in it. But sometimes you have to. Death is the answer sometimes in order for other people to get it.
And even though it's 4 out of 6, it's 4 more people that you've helped in
Exactly.
the world.
I've had staff who felt bad because they couldn't help. You can't help everybody. I had to come to that realization a long time ago. And God, this is April, May. In 2 months, I'll be 50 years old. And I always thought that I could help everybody. But I had to come to the realization, no, you can only help those who want to help themselves. And at the end of the day, for JOY Baltimore, we're an organization where you don't age out of our program. So if you're 35 years old and you were part of JOY Baltimore and something happens, you can come back. We're not going to turn you away because you're not a youth. We're just not going to do that.
It's the built support systems that they made when they were younger. I mean, it's important to keep those. Yeah.
And when you gain people's trust, you have to keep delivering. You must keep delivering. And even when people leave the program, I'm nosy. I am nosy. So if there's social media, they can add me as friend. I'm trailing social media accounts, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of it, TikTok. And so if I see something that's inappropriate or that it should not be, I'm inbound. Is everything good? What's going on? We need to have a conversation.
Do you think the government is not providing adequate aid to these homeless youth? What do you think they could be doing differently? And have you encountered any barriers with, like the government and policy?
So funding is difficult only because we are a grassroots organization. We're not one of the big companies out here doing the work. And so we get lost in translation. I think they can open their resources more to a lot of the grassroots organizations who are on the ground actually doing the work, helping the bigger organizations out. Because without the grassroots organizations, they would not know how to access the young people at all. Honestly, the bigger organizations need the smaller organizations to keep them funded. But then the smaller organizations don't see any of the funding at all. We're just left in the wind, still doing the work, though. I don't think it's the policies. I think it's the fact that a lot of the larger organizations will do the bare minimum just to get the number and to continue the funding.
Our next question is, in your experience, what is the best way to reach teens with substance abuse disorder?
Straight talk. Straight talk, no chaser. I run a youth works program. For the last 5 years, JOY Baltimore has been a youth work provider. And so we take kids in for youth works. Youth works is 14 to age of 21. And we've done it for 5 years now. Our return rate of youth that come back to work with us is 95%. And then they bring their friends to want to work with us for the summer. We are straight to the point, no chaser. From day one, I open up the door. You have to have these conversations. If you don't have these conversations, these kids are going to commit suicide. They're going to be on drugs beyond perks and Adderall and marijuana and cocaine and Tina, which is crystal meth, which is now known on the street in the black gay community as Tina. And the parents don't know this stuff because they're not having the conversations.
Exactly, and you're becoming that support system, that bond of trust that the kids need. And they're more willing to open up to you because you're not the parent that they've been living with their entire life.
If you start talking about prevention at an early age, then when they're 19 or 20 or 20 or 18 going into college, they won't be that alcoholic in the dorm room or going to the parties turning up. Because we talked about it and we started having a conversation at 13 and 14 years of age. It cannot be the deep, dark secret of the family. What goes on in our house we don't discuss. Then you lose your children.
And you're having those heavy conversations that get things out in the open that save lives.
And we do it in a fun way, but it's a serious topic. LGBTQ has no look. Homeless has no look. And if we keep putting looks on things, we're going to miss it.
What has been the most impactful experience you've had in your line of work?
Seeing young people get housed and maintaining their housing. And just continuing to have those conversations with them on how to maintain housing. And there's going to be some road bumps and there's going to be some problems. But that's as a person living in an apartment, that's what happens. But just seeing young people get the keys and being able to turn that key into their door is great.
Are there any final statements that you want to say before we close out this podcast?
I admire young people like yourselves who are continuing to reach and to find out what's really going on in this world and digging, because most people are not doing that. They're taking the statistics and say, oh, this is what it is, and they're keeping it moving. No, that's not what it is. I'm clear, and I'm real clear. One, young people don't use the word homelessness. They don't consider themselves homeless. Two, between the ages of, lower now, 14 to 19, because you can legally be put out of your house at 18. But 14 to 19, young people start smelling themselves, as my mother would tell me when I was younger. And they don't want to follow the rules in their home. And so naturally, if you can't follow the rules here, then you can't stay here. And so you're not homeless because someone put you out because you don't have a place to stay. You're homeless by choice because you couldn't follow the rules. And I guarantee you, when we have those parent communications and conversations, that's what comes up at the end of it. Well, if they do this in the house, then they can stay here. If they do that, they can come back home. Or you're not homeless because your parents threw you out because you were LGBTQ. You can't get thrown out at 21 and you're LGBTQ and you've been LGBTQ since you were 13, 14, or 12. What happened those years? So let's get to the bottom line of why young people are really homeless. And that's what we're not finding out. We're just taking their word and we're running with it. Whereas when they come into my program, I need to find out what's really going on. It's a lot, but I'm glad that you ladies and Matthew are doing the work to find out what's the real deal. Homeless has no look. It's like the main cause of homelessness is young people really aging out of the foster care system with nowhere to go. But as far as youth on the street who have family, I'm sure there's a story. And no agency or organization wants to hear that story because that story doesn't give you funding.
So our next question is, what would you like the listeners of this podcast / our little GPH community that'll probably watch this, what would you like for us to take away?
Know that young people are resilient. Do not underestimate young people. Do not underestimate homeless young people. They're resilient and resourceful. And if you hold them accountable for what they need, they will get on their game.
What do you think that people like me, Julia, Amanda, and Neha can do to help?
Continue doing what you do. See young people for who they are. You have friends. You have roommates. See them for who they are. Have that conversation with them. There are people in your school right now who might be actively homeless, but they're going to classes. Know some warning signs. But when you see a red flag, know that it's a red flag and don't ignore it. Because we see the red flags and maybe something. No. If you see it, then something's going on.
Well, Lonnie, I'm so glad we were able to have this conversation. This is very illuminating, and you've touched on some really important topics that we hadn't even brought up in our questions, but we're so glad that you were able to, talk about them and make them valuable as things that we need to know. This is a really important conversation, and a lot of people aren't talking about it because it's controversial and they don't want to think about it, or they don't believe it's happening, or they just think that the people put themselves in these positions when a lot of the times it's not the case. Majority of the times it's not the case. And then the role the government plays in this, the social status quo, the things like that, it's way too complex for you to put a label on things and say, oh, this is your fault.
So, why should any city end homelessness in their city? Why? If they end homeless in their city, they get no more federal funding. So I'm going too far now. But I mean, it's almost like the drug game. If we stop putting drugs in the communities, how do we keep the substance abuse places open?
Because first and foremost, they're people.
People first. I tell people all the time, I don't think I'm better than anyone. But at the end of the day, I want something different. And that's what I try to instill in my young people, wanting something different.
This has been a really wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for coming
Thank
here.
y'all.
I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I think I could say the same for all of my peers. Me too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Y'all. Take care.
All right, that does it for Deconstructing the System with GPH. See you next time on our podcast.